Last week, the Vice President of the United States told us that a riot that happened here in the U.S. Capitol last year was the equivalent of the day in which Japan attacked us at Pearl Harbor and the U.S. was pulled into a world war that took the lives of over 3% of the world's population. And yesterday we were treated to the President telling us that election laws that are being passed by various states across the country over the last year are basically the same, the equivalent of the segregation that existed in this country in the 1950s and 60s and before. Now look, if your daily routine is to wake up in the morning and turn on MSNBC as you ride your Peloton, and then you go on Twitter as you're drinking your caramel macchiato, and then you're reading the New York Times as you're eating your avocado toast, I imagine all this makes perfect sense to you. After all, for these people, they believe this ridiculous narrative that every Republican is an insurrectionist, probably a racist, wants to overthrow the U.S. government, and wants to destroy democracy. The good news is that the overwhelming majority of Americans happen to live back here on planet Earth. And what they're worried about, to the extent they even paid attention to any of the stuff that's been said over the last 2 weeks, what they're really worried about is the fact that everything costs more. You go to the grocery store and the shelves are empty. They have a small business and they hire someone on Monday who just disappears on Thursday and never comes back. You've got every day thousands of people illegally entering the United States across an open border. And by the way, we have a surge of violent crime and lawlessness across the country. That's probably what they're worried about. In fact, I know it is on a daily basis. But to the extent they've paid attention to any of this, let me tell you something. First of all, I think almost everyone would tell you that what happened on January 6th here was a terrible thing. It should never have happened, and it should never happen again. But I don't care how many candlelight vigils and musical performances you have from the cast of Hamilton. You're not going to convince at least most normal and sane people that our government last year was almost overthrown by a guy wearing a Viking hat and Speedos. Okay? And I don't care, how many of these speeches the president gives in which he shouts out this hyperbole and all this melodrama. You're not going to convince people that having a state pass a law that says, for example, that you have to produce an identification is the same as segregation. Nevertheless, despite the fact that that's what most people in this country are worried about is inflation and all these other things, that's not what we're working on here. That's not what we'll spend this week on. That's not what the priority of this administration has been. That's not what the president is giving speeches about. They don't care. You may care about inflation back home. They care about the fact their crisis is that there's some laws in this country, for example, some states in this country that do not automatically force everyone to register to vote. They just automatically register everyone. That's the crisis. They don't care that store shelves are empty. In fact, they've denied that the store shelves are actually empty. For them, the real problem is that states have laws, for example, that don't allow these roving gang of activists to bully people into turning over their ballot so they can show up at 6:59 p.m. on Election Day and just dump it on an elections official. And by the way, they don't seem overly concerned that there are Americans that will be fired or not allowed into a restaurant unless they can produce their papers, their vaccine card. The real problem is how dare you ask them to produce a voter ID, a photo ID in order to vote. That's their real problem. So how can this be? I mean, how can there be such an enormous disconnect between what real people in the real world care about and are talking about on a daily basis and what we're going to spend our time talking about here in these speeches that have been given over the last week? It isn't about the Capitol riot. Everyone agrees the Capitol riot was terrible and shouldn't have happened, I think. Most everyone does. But these are some of the same people that downplayed. Over 700 riots. Thousands of cases of looting that happened in America in the summer of 2020. It most certainly isn't about election laws that have been passed in the last year. They've been pushing these same bills with different titles and different names. They've been pushing all of this for the better part of a decade. And it certainly isn't about voting rights. It is easier than it has ever been in the history of the United States to register to vote and to vote. And the proof is that in 2020, we had the highest turnout in over 100 and something years. This isn't about any of that. If you're paying attention, let me tell you what this is about. This is about power. This is about power. This is about changing the rules of the Senate so they have the power to ram through an election law. And this is about ramming through an election law to make sure that they never lose power, to make it easier to win elections for them, and therefore have power for perpetuity. You want to talk about defending democracy? Let's talk about the Americans, real people, who are afraid to donate to a political campaign, to put a bumper sticker on their car, to tell people who they voted for. They're afraid because they don't want to get canceled, they don't want to get boycotted, they don't want to get harassed, so they're afraid. They don't get smeared. We want to talk about totalitarianism? Let's talk about the fact that the Attorney General of the United States has said, let's go after some of these parents complaining at school boards and treat them as domestic terrorists. And listen, if you want to talk about segregation, then let's talk about a system of education that is both separate and unequal, divided between the people who can afford to spend $50,000 or $60,000 a year to send their kids to a fancy school where they get SAT tutoring and they get all kinds of advantages, and the thousands, no, millions of American parents that are Hispanic and African American and others who have no choice whatsoever as to where their kids go to school. They have no voice. They have to send their kids to the school the government tells them. These people don't care about any of this because it's about power. It's not just the power to change election laws. We've seen it. It's about the power to tell you what you're allowed to say. It's about the power to tell you where you're allowed to go. It's about the power to tell you what you're allowed to do. It's about the power to intimidate, to destroy, to smear, to call a racist, a bigot, a hater, anyone who dares get in your way, anyone who dares disagree with you. It's about the power to do that. Well, let me tell you something. I was raised by and have lived my entire life alongside people who lost their country, the country of their birth, to power-hungry people just like that. I warn you, do not stand by and allow it to happen to this one. I yield the floor.
We're also number one for new business investment with $2.7 million in new investment coming to Florida every hour. Closest state to us is Texas with $700,000 in new investments every hour. And we've led the country since I've been governor in new business formations outright. You know, California has almost twice the number of people we do, and yet we have far more new business formations in the state of Florida than they do. And that would not have happened. You know, I was summer of 2020. You know, everyone with the COVID, all this stuff. I got a letter from every Democrat member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Florida saying that having businesses open was reckless and that you needed to lock down Florida. You needed to have everybody. They wanted them to shelter in place. They wanted mandates. They wanted all these different things. And so, I get this letter and I'm looking at it and the media was hysterical and everybody's attacking me, whatnot, but I got the letter, I reviewed the letter. I thought about all the millions of people that those policies would have plunged into turmoil. And so I took that letter, I crumpled up the letter and I threw it in the trash can. And the reality is we've been able to outpace the nation because we have been a free and open state when many of the other states around this country were not. We had kids in school when many of the other places in this country did not. And the results, the economic results speak for themselves, but then the academic performance. They just came out last Monday with the nation's report card. It's the only testing that is done in all 50 states. And they do state by state, 4th grade, 8th grade. 4th grade reading and 4th grade math, we were number 3 and 4 in the nation, respectively, for those two subjects. And if you adjust for demographics, we're number 1 in the country in both 4th grade reading and 4th grade math under those tests. You look at some of the other states, large states that treated the kids much differently than we did, obviously treated them very poorly. They're like 35th, 36th, 37th in the nation now in those things. And so it was really important to make sure that we had kids in school. Also just important for families because parents work and they do all this other stuff. So we're proud to have been able to do that. And we're proud that because we've done all that stuff, Our kids perform better than these other states. Our economy is performing better than many of these other states. We have the biggest budget surplus in the history of the state of Florida by far. I mean, not even close in terms of the previous budget surplus. We're also working on, we have the number one, I think, economic issue for the country, is this inflation. And that was a result of Washington overspending, printing too much money, borrowing, and reducing our ability to produce our own domestic energy. It's a policy-driven situation that we see where this inflation was created by a lot of bad policies. Well, we don't control the Fed or Congress's purse strings here in Florida, but we can do things to try to help folks. So we are going to, in the next legislative session, we're going to be the biggest tax relief for people that we've ever had. We're going to do a 50% reduction in tolls for all of our commuters statewide, for all tolls we're going to do. We're going to do no tax on raising kids. So no tax on diapers, on baby clothes, on wipes, on strollers, on cribs. And that's going to be permanent. We have a 5, a 4, and a 2-year-old. And, our 2-year-old is kind of getting beyond that. So my wife said that we would have saved you a little bit of money if you'd have done this the first year. But I told her we didn't have Bidenflation my first year either. So, it is what it is. But so we are proud about doing that. And we're also, because we want it to be family friendly, no tax on pet food, too. We're going to put the pets in there. So, yeah, we're excited. So that's just us trying to see, how can we help the situation as you see. Look, if I could wave a magic wand and change our energy policy, I would do it. If I could wave a magic wand and change some of the inflationary policies, I would do it. That's going to require a little bit more lift, I think. And maybe this election will change some of the stuff in the Congress in terms of who's going up there, and maybe we'll see some changes there. But in the meantime, we want to be helpful. So one of the things that we've been able to do, because the economy's done well here, because we have record budget surplus, we have been able to invest in a lot of infrastructure, targeted infrastructure. So we do a major thing anyways every year, but then communities with our Job Growth Grant Fund can apply to get grants to help with different things. So we've been able to help a lot of communities across the state of Florida do things that will lay a foundation for more economic growth, or do workforce training to help critical industries. And we've done a whole host of stuff. And so today, we are doing another award that the city of Marathon requested. So we're doing $1.3 million for infrastructure improvements here in Marathon. And that is going to do, this will allow the city to do the following things. Widen US 1, of course, the main road through Marathon, also known as Overseas Highway. Add a turn lane at the intersection of US 1 and Banana Boulevard. Yes, that's good. Yeah. And add utility infrastructure along US 1, including nearly a mile of new sewer lines, increasing the wastewater capacity for the entire system on Marathon. And so we think this will bring, this foundation will help create probably about 500 new jobs, economic impact of over $3 million. And when this is finished, the area will be ready for new business growth that will create even more jobs for the city of Marathon. Now, one of the things that, we're proud to have done, because you see what a beautiful area we have here. You see how much fishing and being outdoors and boating is so important to the state of Florida, but particularly for people that live in the Florida Keys. And we came in and said that we wanted to really, really focus on improving all of those things with respect to Everglades restoration, water coming to Florida Bay, blue-green algae, you name it. And we put our money where our mouth is. We've made huge improvements. $1.1 billion in water quality improvements since I've been governor, $1.1 billion for the Resilient Florida program, and $1.7 billion for Everglades restoration projects. And so so you have more water that's going from Lake Okeechobee south through the Everglades and into Florida Bay than has ever happened in a long time. The water is now improved in Florida Bay as a result of it, because that's the way nature would have the water go. And, man has made different decisions throughout Florida's history. So we're trying to kind of restore what God created for us here, and I think it's going to be continue to be good. So we're going to do more on that as we go forward here. But this is really, really important because we understand that people come from all over the world to want to fish in the state of Florida, but particularly to fish in the Florida Keys. And we realize how special that is, and we want to continue to have that and attract people. And Bass Pro we're the #1 state for Bass Pro Shops because obviously, of course, because you go at every area, they Bass Pro has owned and operated the iconic Worldwide Sportsman since 1997 in Isla Mirada. With our investments in infrastructure and the environment, Bass Pro founder and CEO Johnny Morris will be able to bring an exciting world-class fishing resort right here to Marathon. And this new expansion will bring jobs, restaurant, entertainment. And we're happy to be here with him today, and he's going to come up in 1 second and say a little bit what he's got in store for this great area right here. But I'm excited to be able to make an impact. We've got an awful lot of great things going on in this state, and we're going to continue to make sure that we keep the state free, we keep the state prosperous, and that everybody has a chance to succeed. So, Johnny, if you want to come up here and talk about what you got.